Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The frigid temperatures continue in our region. We chat with a meteorologist from Environment Canada about where the extreme cold air is coming from. The Alberta provincial election is coming up next year. We chat with our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson about what it will take for the UCP to get re-elected. And tragedy strikes a large home in Philadelphia, leaving 13 people dead, including 7 children.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you live in and around Lethbridge, you've had to put up with some bitterly cold temperatures over the past few days. Environment Canada issued another extreme cold weather warning for southwestern Alberta. This week, an Arctic air mass is coming in from Canada's North Pole. Alyssa Peterson, a meteorologist from Environment Canada, says there were records broken during our recent cold snap.
Our coldest day looks to be this morning into tomorrow or Thursday morning. I can say, though, with this cold snap, we did have a brief little break there on the weekend, this past weekend for, the start of 2022. But the week before, we had, on December 27th, with the first bit of this big cold snap that we're kind of in the middle of, we had, 15 records broken. There's individual days within this cold snap that have been extremely record-breaking.
Environment Canada says another reprieve is on the way for southwestern Alberta. The Chinook winds will be blowing into our region next week, and we should get back up to around 14 degrees on Monday. Full weather details coming up later in our program. Now, with the cold winter weather comes slick driving conditions for drivers. City officials are reminding motorists to allow for extra time and slow down when traveling because so many of the roads are snow and ice covered. And plugging in your vehicle is a must during these extreme cold temperatures. And if you don't plug in your vehicle, it may not start, and you may be waiting a long time for a boost or a tow.
We are at about 50% over our normal call volume for both tow and boosts in the Lethbridge area. So about 50% more. We're sitting at about a 3-hour wait time for the full service and about 2 hours for light service. So that's your boosts, your unlocks, tire changes, that sort of thing. It's not Lethbridge on their own island. It's really every town and city throughout the province, and especially in those bigger metro areas, Edmonton and Calgary, where we're seeing the wait times exceed 60 hours.
If you're planning on venturing out, the AMA suggests having an emergency kit handy in case you need help down the road. Your feedback is needed for a snow removal and street sweeping survey. The information will then be given over to Lethbridge City Council, where they will then decide if any changes will have to be made for the 2022-23 snow removal season. An interactive map is available to see how snow removal and street sweeping changes could impact you. Julianne Ruck with the city says in the past, residents have been anxious about the city doing more when it comes to snow plowing.
Plows out on the road with sanders on the back. And nobody likes those ruts that form after a while in neighborhoods, so the plowing would remove the snow away. The drawback from doing more plowing is that now potentially driveways get plowed in, right? So all this we try to describe in the options that we lay out in the Get Involved page, because we want residents to really understand that if we do more plowing, there is impact that sidewalks and driveways might get plowed in.
The survey is open until February 13th, and the findings will be presented to Lethbridge City Council by the spring. The survey is available at getinvolvedlethbridge.ca. As you've heard on Bridge City News, the province announced that students in kindergarten through grade 12 will be going back to school on January the 10th. Alberta's Education Minister, Adriana LaGrange, says for students in grades 4 through 9, they will also be able to tap into free online tutoring resources beginning next week.
This will help them catch up on important skills and learning that they may have fallen behind on during the pandemic. The e-tutoring hub will be launched with pre-recorded video tutoring sessions on literacy and numeracy that students and their parents can access anytime. And later this year, online tutoring will be expanded to include more subjects and grades, and live tutoring will be offered. Parents, students, and educators are encouraged to try the tool and give us feedback to inform future sessions.
The Alberta Teachers Association is speaking out following the province's decision to delay the start of in-person classes for students coming back from the winter break. ATA President Jason Schilling says they were not spoken to before the decision was made.
It's a decision that was made by government, and unfortunately, the association was not consulted on whether or not we thought a delay of students returning to January 10th would be a good idea or not. So it's the decision that was made. We know that from past experiences with waves throughout the pandemic, that community spread is often echoed or mirrored within our school communities, and seeing such a sharp increase in cases over the holidays in the latter part of December, it did cause a lot of concern and stress and anxiety for teachers and for students as well.
With the return of students on January 10th, proper health protocols will also be in effect, such as rapid testing. Schilling says they still need to have more conversations with the province about enhancing some of the protocols already in place. New Year's resolutions are not just about losing weight, traveling more, and learning new hobbies. For some people, resolutions are about breaking free from a crushing addiction. Teen Challenge is an organization which helps young people break free from drug and alcohol abuse. Al Nelson with Teen Challenge explains what the biggest vices are for so many people today.
The big one now is fentanyl, and it's a killer. And there's so many folks that are involved in that between meth and fentanyl. There's also quite a few there that it would be alcohol. So most of them are drug or alcohol related. Over the Christmas period, get a lot of visitors, get a lot of people that sow into the ministry, a lot of gifting for the guys. They all do stay there during Christmas and family visits and things like that. So yeah, it's actually a really good time during the Christmas season.
Now, for more information about the helpful programs being offered through Teen Challenge, be sure to visit their website. The final numbers have been tallied for the Lethbridge Family Services Angel Tree campaign. Over 3,000 children and youth were able to receive gift bundles this year. Donors also gave generously to the campaign to the tune of over $190,000 in cash. The Adopt a Family program has also helped over 100 families. Organizers of the initiative say they're in shock of the generosity of Lethbridge and Southern Alberta residents.
The numbers took our breath away. We did not expect this kind of need, and certainly there was a huge need in the community this year. And I think it's partly mental health needs, partly it's emotional, and COVID has definitely played a role with the needs in the community. We were so happy to be able to help everyone. This community stepped up when we needed help to do the gift bundles, because when we were down to the last 800 children, we had 0 gifts in our shelves, and we were able, all the way up until December 24th, we delivered gifts to our families.
Over 6,000 gifts were collected, and there were close to 300 volunteers who helped make Angel Tree a huge success. The Christmas Hope campaign also finalized the numbers. The program is a collaboration between various groups, including our food banks, the Shop of Wonders, Salvation Army, and the Angel Tree. The program helped assist an enormous amount of children here in our community. This includes over 5,000 kids and close to 2,500 adults. It's an increase of over 1,700 who were previously helped. Over 1,000 volunteers put in over 4,500 hours during the month of December to make the campaign happen. Imagine being able to see the world through just a click of a button. A pair of Lethbridge entrepreneurs are making that happen with their new app. BCN's Angela Stewart has the details.
We truly believe that people are better humans when they see the world.
But especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, that's been hard. However, with Steve Christensen and Greg Stonehawker's new app, Newly, seeing the world is just at your fingertips.
We really wanted to help everyone see the world, whether it's from the comfort of your own home or jumping on a plane and going somewhere else in the world.
Officially up and running just last year, Newly is a platform where creators all over the world can showcase a unique attraction or place for people to see.
For a small Lethbridge company, we've only been doing this for about 4 months, like live pushing the product. And we hear from guides everywhere that they love the idea, they love the concept, and they love using the product. It's just easy to use, it's simple.
Now let's just pretend that this office space in Lethbridge is a really cool tourist attraction that I wanted people to check out. As a new user of the app, I would create a profile using my name and picture, and then I would schedule an event. And then the day that I scheduled that event for, I would go on a live stream and I would showcase the office space for people to check out, all from their phone. But it's not just for traveling. Creators can host an event to showcase their work.
So it is a platform that allows individuals to build and grow their own business and their own livelihood based off of our platform.
And some of the cool up-and-coming features.
One of them is kind of going live right now, so it's not necessarily a scheduled event. So you can go live right now. But the thing that we love about it is once you build your following or build your herd, people get notified instantly.
The pair say that they've been getting great feedback from not only in Lethbridge, but all over the world. The app is only available on iOS right now, but work is being done to take it to Android. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Now that the year 2022 has arrived, that means next year we'll have a provincial election in Alberta. There are a number of people who believe it'll be a real struggle for Jason Kenney and the UCP to be re-elected. But there are other people who say the last thing Alberta needs right now is another NDP government. So I posed a question to our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson. What will it take for Jason Kenney and the UCP to win another term?
Balanced budget's going to make a difference. Holding the line on not introducing something like a sales tax is going to make a difference. Successfully implementing the childcare stuff, which is supposed to be rolling out in the weeks to come, is going to be, a big issue for suburban families and things like that. So there's a bunch of other issues sort of percolating here. The big one for me, I think, has got to be the economy. I don't see a path back to the Premier's office if the economy, completely collapses.
Tyler Dawson will also discuss how Premier Jason Kenney recently got into a bit of hot water following a year-end interview with the Calgary Sun. He'll have details coming up after business news. As many Albertans have been dealing with the Omicron variant of COVID-19, the City of Edmonton says the virus could affect services like transit, snow clearing, and garbage collection. It says due to increasing cases across city departments, adjustments are being considered to continue delivering priority services. Now, as of Tuesday, there are around 200 active COVID-19 cases in the city's workforce. At Edmonton Fire Rescue Services, around 50 of the 1,100 firefighters are off with COVID-19. BC's Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, says during this latest COVID-19 wave involving the Omicron variant, schools and businesses must reinforce safety protocols to help everyone keep safe.
Given this rate of transmission, the short incubation period, and the high number of people who are getting ill, we need now all businesses to put contingency plans in place to keep businesses operating when staff are off ill. At this point, given the number of people getting sick every day, we need to reactivate those COVID-19 safety plans. Those were the layers of protection specific to your business that allowed you to operate safely. We need to anticipate that as many as a third of your workforce at any one time may become ill with COVID-19.
The Saskatchewan Ministry of Education says more than 1.4 million rapid COVID-19 tests have been dished out at elementary schools, and another 250,000 were given out at other schools. The province is encouraging students and staff to take rapid tests before attending class. Saskatchewan is the only province in Canada that did not extend its holiday break in the face of surging COVID-19 cases. Staff also have access to disposable medical-grade surgical masks, and millions of dollars have been allocated for air purification upgrades at schools.
Close contact students and staff who are fully vaccinated will follow the current process of self-monitoring. They are able to attend school and other activities as long as they remain asymptomatic. Families and staff also have access to rapid tests to assist with self-monitoring. For students who are close contacts and not vaccinated, they will continue to attend school and childcare as long as they are asymptomatic, but are asked to isolate from any other activities outside of school for 10 days.
Manitoba Premier Heather Stefanson is giving details about why she removed Infrastructure and Emergency Measures Minister Ron Schuler from Cabinet last week. Stefanson says Schuler's messaging on COVID-19 vaccines was not consistent with the province's vaccination efforts. Schuler had refused to discuss his vaccination status. While he said he was not against vaccines, he said people should listen to their doctor and the decision comes down to individual rights.
What I would say is that the public messaging from Mr. Schuler has not been necessarily consistent with the spirit of our government's efforts to get Manitobans fully vaccinated and continue to move forward on that front. And so I had the discussion and certainly thank Minister Schuler for his time, but we need to keep laser focused on ensuring that Manitobans get fully vaccinated. We know that that helps keep Manitobans out of hospitals, out of ICUs, and we'll continue to promote that as a government.
Ottawa and First Nations leaders announced a $40 billion agreement in principle to compensate First Nations children and their families broken up by a child welfare system. Close to half of the settlement will be compensation, and the rest of the money will go towards reforming the child welfare system.
I'm very pleased to announce that Canada and the parties have reached two significant agreements in principle. One that provides fair and equitable compensation to First Nations children and families harmed by discriminatory underfunding, and the other addressing the long-term reform that's needed for the First Nations Child and Family Services Program. Through the agreement in principle on long-term reform and child and family services, the system will be reformed by focusing first and foremost on prevention. First Nations and First Nations child and family service providers will be better positioned to address the factors that lead to First Nations children being taken into care. They will have that stable and predictable funding that will help them to keep their children with their families and in communities.
This historic settlement of $40 billion has been a long time coming. First Nations from across Canada have had to work very hard for this day to provide redress for monumental wrongs against First Nation children, wrongs fueled by an inherently biased system.
At least 13 people are dead, including 7 children, following a residential fire in Philadelphia on Wednesday morning. Fire officials say 2 others were also taken to hospital with various injuries.
Companies began an aggressive attack on the fire, and in the process discovered that there were multiple fatalities at this location. I've been around for 35 years now, and this is probably one of the worst fires I've ever been to. I don't have the words for how we're feeling right now as a community and as a department.
Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo will not face criminal prosecution over an allegation that he groped an aide after prosecutors said he could not prove the case.
Good to see you guys. It appears that former Governor Andrew Cuomo will not have any criminal charges against him for some of his sexual misconduct that led to his premature resignation and ultimately led to him not running for a 4th-term re-election in the fall. What is interesting, though, is that Andrew Cuomo still has $18 million in the bank, which makes it such that anyone with $18 million in the bank that they can use at their own discretion, many have not counted him out as a politician. And so there are a few camps in New York State. There are those who feel as though Andrew Cuomo was mistreated, that he shouldn't have resigned, that this is Me Too gone wild. There are people on the opposite end of the spectrum that just believe that Andrew Cuomo cultivated and really was the bedrock of a very toxic environment in Albany based on misconduct and bullying and toxic masculinity and all the things that sort of the Me Too movement has been trying to erode and eradicate.
While the extreme cold warning continued for much of southwestern Alberta, a reprieve, however, is on the way, but not until Sunday. Full weather details are on deck. The extreme cold warning from Environment Canada continued for Lethbridge. Tonight, make sure you either park in the garage or plug in your vehicle as we're headed down to minus 32 degrees. Thursday, more snow developing with a high of only minus 18. Flurries on Friday with the temperature remaining steady at minus 18 degrees. Saturday, we should see the sunshine again with a high of minus 16. Sunday, the Chinook winds finally return, bringing us a balmy high of 0. Load up on the windshield washer fluid. The meltdown will continue on Monday as we should see a high of 14 degrees. A mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 13 on Tuesday. Now the average high for this time of year is minus 2 with an average low of minus 14. The highest temperature in the state was recorded in 2006 at 13 degrees. and the record low was a very cold -36 in 1996. The sun rose at 8:26 and set at 4:46. Looking at Thursday's national forecast now, Victoria will see rain mixed with snow and a high of 5 degrees. Rain or snow at 3 degrees for Vancouver. Much colder in the prairie provinces. Expect an overcast day and -24 for Edmonton. Periods of snow and -24 as well for Calgary. The extreme cold warning continues for many parts of Saskatchewan. Expect a partly cloudy sky and -28 in Regina. Just a few clouds and -29 degrees in Saskatoon. The extreme cold warning also applied for Winnipeg today. Thursday clearing with a high of only -24. Much milder in the central part of the country. In Toronto, expect light flurries and a high of -1. A chance of flurries of -3 for both Ottawa and Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, expect light flurries and +2 in Fredericton, New Brunswick. A chance of showers and 7 degrees for Halifax, Nova Scotia. Flurries mixed with rain and +2 for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, it should be rainy with a high of 8 degrees on Thursday. Canada and the U.S. each claimed victory after arbitrators issued their final report into American complaints about dairy imports. U.S. trade representatives formally requested a dispute settlement panel last May. It was to examine allegations from American dairy producers that Canada is denying them fair access to the Canadian market. The ruling says Canada unfairly favors Canadian processors, but Canadian trade officials said the ruling is otherwise overwhelmingly in favor of Canada's dairy industry. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is sounding the alarm following the recently released report by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. It is recommending annual surtaxes of between 0.2 to 1% on the value of a home over $1 million. The tax would accumulate until the home is either sold or inherited. So a homeowner who sold their house after 10 years of ownership could face a new tax of close to $10,000. The report estimates the form of a house tax could cost Canadians about $5.8 billion a year. The Calgary Real Estate Board says the market in early 22 is beginning with some of the tightest conditions seen in more than a decade. The board says 2021 ended with a record 1,737 homes sold. That is up 45% from December of 2020. New listings were up by just under 5% as the average home price increased 10% to nearly $478,000. Chief economists say the supply in Calgary has not kept pace with the demand, causing strong price growth. Hong Kong is imposing a 2-week ban on flights from Canada and 7 other countries as part of an attempt to stem an emerging outbreak of the COVID-19 Omicron variant. The 2-week ban on passenger flights from countries including Canada, Britain, Australia, and the United States will take effect on Sunday. Authorities are also holding 2,500 passengers on a cruise ship for coronavirus testing. Government officials in Hong Kong also say restaurant dining will not be allowed after 2 weeks beginning on Friday. Chrysler says it plans for its entire vehicle lineup to be all electric by the year 2028. It is the latest brand to announce a major shift away from gas-powered cars amid pressure to act on climate change. The American automaker also says it will launch its first battery electric vehicle by the year 2025. Chrysler announced its electric plans along with an AI-enabled vehicle system powered by a battery it says can travel up to 640 kilometers per charge. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 196 points on the day to finish at 21,040. The Dow was down 392 points to 36,407. The S&P 500 was down 92 points to 4701. And the Nasdaq was down 522 points on the day to 15,100. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 22 cents to 77.21 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 12 cents to 384 US. Gold was up 11 cents to 18.1055 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 22.81 US an ounce. Wheat is at $12.79 per bushel, barley's at $9.80, canola's at $23.28, and corn is at $10.59 per bushel. Live cattle were down 58 cents to $137.25. Feeder cattle were down 55 cents to $162.13, and lean hogs were up $2.13 to $82.28. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 78.38 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the final numbers have been tallied for the Lethbridge Family Services Angel Tree campaign. Over 3,000 children and youth were able to receive gift bundles this year. Donors also gave generously to the campaign, bringing in a total of $190,000 in donations. The Adoptive Family Program also helped over 100 families. So what will it take for Jason Kenney and the UCP to be re-elected next year? Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson will give us his thoughts next. So what are many people across the province of Canada talking about right now? It's the new COVID-19 variant known as Omicron. Now, with around 30,000 active cases, many are quite concerned with this highly contagious virus. Now, there's some reports, however, that it may not be as strong as the Delta variant. To talk about what the government is doing to protect us here is our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson. Happy New Year, Tyler.
Happy New Year to you too, Hal.
Thanks so much. Now, the winter break was extended for students until January the 10th. But what is the province really doing to help stop the spread of the variant? Or can anything really be done at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you were to ask the New Democrats, I think they would probably say nothing's being done. And the United Conservatives would counter and say that Alberta has, sort of among the strongest health restrictions in the country. Of course, people will remember a couple weeks ago when the government sort of relaxed some of its restrictions for Christmas. They relaxed them at the same time that other provinces were tightening theirs. But of course, they all sort of ended up in a similar kind of ballpark of restrictions. So the government would say, that's sort of what they're doing to keep people safe while keeping an eye on the variant, which, as you mentioned, has about 30,000 active cases in Alberta, but doesn't seem just yet to see hospitalizations and deaths following. And as you alluded to, there's some indication this might be more mild. Obviously, there's relatively high vaccination rates in the province. Boosters have been rolled out. So there's all these sorts of things sort of happening. And but certainly, it does feel like a little bit of a waiting game. If we go back a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, I feel like it was like 200 cases and, everything was shut down out of an abundance of caution. And now, we look at 30,000 and we're like, ooh, that's pretty bad. But, the tools may be in place. People maybe know what they need to do. Masking is required, things like that. So certainly it'll be an interesting couple weeks on the virus front, I think.
Now, Tyler, the province rolled out rapid antigen tests and then ran out of them. A lot of pharmacies I went to, they said, no, we ran out hours ago. Now, meanwhile, boosters have also fully opened up. The province also cut isolation times for the fully vaccinated. It went from 10 to 5 days. Now, the reason why the time was cut down is that people need to get back to work.
Yeah, so these are, a couple of the other things that are sort of percolating here. As you alluded to, a real sort of Hunger Games scenario with the rapid antigen tests, people waiting in lines, trying to find them. I was actually on the way to get groceries the other day and I saw a lineup outside my neighborhood pharmacy and I was like, oh, they must have tests. And stopped on the way back home and waited in line for about half an hour to get one. And boosters obviously opened up to the entire population as well, not just those sort of 60 plus and 50 plus, which was sort of the last increments. But as you say, isolation requirements have changed. We've all been sort of used to this 10-day isolation for the duration of the pandemic, and it's now down to 5. And that's for people who are not symptomatic, who are fully vaccinated. Obviously, if you're coughing up a lung, don't go to work on day 6. But yeah, they basically are saying that, there's the risk of sort of a staff and labor shortage. You talk to some small business. I've got friends who work in retail who are saying that, yeah, they've got like 30% of their workforce off right now. So it's a real risk there. This decision has been absolutely panned by labor unions. Other provinces have followed suit as well. Jerry Diaz, the head of Unifor, when I talked to him earlier this week, saying that this was putting profits over people. So kind of controversial, but this is following in the steps of other provinces. The CDC in the United States has made similar recommendations. So it's, a controversial decision, but it's sort of an interesting one. And frankly, I think it's a bit hard to say what the impact of that will be, maybe either on the labor force or on the spread of the virus.
Now, as we discussed earlier, the return to classes has been delayed until January the 10th. Now, this should give teachers time to prepare, and millions of rapid tests and masks will be available for students. Now, the opposition NDP says students need more support. What support specifically they're talking about?
Well, they're talking about a number of things. So they want N95 masks given out, not just medical grade masks. Those are sort of the more sealed, tightly sealed ones. They want mental health counselors in school. They want a fund created to support families whose kids are at home, and things like that. So, and they also want HEPA filters in schools to, I guess, clean the air. So they've sort of made all these proposals before. Obviously the sort of school safety thing is an ongoing discussion and it comes up every time there's another wave. But given this delay, the NDP is sort of taking the opportunity to sort of reintroduce its ideas and propose what it might do to keep schools safer and stop some of the spread there. And the other thing I should mention is that Ontario, which also delayed its return to school, said part of the reason why they delayed the return to school was because given the rates of Omicron in the sort of private sector, they're concerned that they just simply wouldn't have enough teachers in the classroom. No real indication if that's a fear in Alberta, but no doubt the sort of spread among working staff is part of the issue at play here as well.
Our Premier got into a little bit of hot water recently. During a year-end interview with the Calgary Sun, Jason Kenney was asked if there will be another pandemic. And what was his reply?
Yeah, he said, who knows what sort of bat soup thing will come out of Wuhan, which obviously is the city in China where the coronavirus originated. And this was sort of immediately panned as being a racist comment, that this was because of people eating bat soup or something, as opposed to some other way the virus evolved, I guess. And there was actually a protest on New Year's Day in Calgary outside of the McDougall Centre, which is sort of the Calgary Premier's office, for lack of a better way to refer to it. About 60 people were out there demanding an apology, a public apology from the Premier, and he did sort of give one. He gave sort of the classic, "If I offended anyone, I'm sorry for my comments." And this actually came after a couple days of them, the Premier's office, sort of trying to defend this to reporters that were asking questions about it. So I would say actually sort of an atypical slip of the tongue for the Premier on something like this. But yeah, ending the year with a bit of controversy, no doubt about that.
Now, MLAs in our province managed to avoid another Aloha Gate scandal. Last year, you and I talked about a number of politicians, including a cabinet minister who traveled abroad in defiance of travel advisories. Now, it appears as though this winter, more politicians are staying a little closer to home.
Yeah, that's right. There's one person that got out of the country, and we don't actually know who it was. So there's this strange back and forth right before Christmas where the UCP sent a letter to caucus and staff and said, there's no travel advisory right now. You're free to travel. Have a good Christmas. And then, of course, like 3 days later, the federal government issued a travel advisory requesting that people not travel. And so the UCP had to sort of reverse course and say, actually, don't travel over the holiday season. One person had already left, and reporters were told that they were going to be coming back. I don't know who it was. I'm not sure any other reporters do either. And the NDP as well kept all of their people close to home. The rumors flew a little bit at the legislature right before Christmas, but as it turned out, as far as we know, nobody actually traveled. So yeah, they avoided a travel scandal this year. Which is certainly good news for Premier Jason Kenney, because as you mentioned last year, they started off the year in real hot water.
You know what I did with my family? I went to Banff, went to the hot springs, Lake Louise, saw the beautiful ice sculptures on the lake. Be a tourist in your own town, spend the money right here in our province. Spend it locally and support local businesses. Now, Tyler, back in December, a nationwide poll was conducted showing that 50% of Canadians would feel comfortable living in Alberta. I thought it'd be higher, especially that we've got Waterton, we've got the Rockies here, Edmonton's beautiful, Calgary, Lethbridge here. Now, at the time, Premier Kenney called it a drive-by smear on our province because only 50% of Canadians would be comfortable, and demanded to know how many would be comfortable living in Quebec. It turns out not that many. A new poll shows that only about 24% would feel good about living in La Belle Province, and Alberta dropped to 49%, but that was the same number as many other provinces?
Yeah, so Alberta's pretty firmly in the middle of the pack, actually. As you say, this poll came out and just caused like this bizarre sudden controversy when people were upset that it was only 50%. Because as you say, beautiful province, pretty good economic situation. You can afford to buy a house here. Lots of good reasons to live in Alberta. But people in this poll saying that only about half of them would have been comfortable living here. And as you say, as it turned out, in Quebec, it's like 24%. Maybe some good reasons for that. The language probably being an obvious one. If you don't speak French, you're probably not going to want to live in Quebec. But other provinces sort of in that range too. So Manitoba and Saskatchewan came in at 38% of people would feel comfortable living there. Ontario tied with Alberta at 49% in this iteration of the poll. And then, interestingly, Atlantic Canada at 63%. That caught my eye, of course, because Atlantic Canada, in addition to being beautiful, has terrible weather, as we all know. And certainly a lot of people from Atlantic Canada have come to Alberta over the last decade or two. So kind of an interesting dichotomy there, I would say. And then the winner is British Columbia at 65%. And I don't think that's actually a massive surprise because everyone thinks BC is, the most beautiful province and all those sorts of things, although, maybe they haven't looked at real estate prices in Victoria and Vancouver. But anyways, the point is, this is an answer to this question that Jason Kenney had, and it turns out that he was more or less right to say, well, what about Quebec?
You know, BC, what does it stand for? Bring cash, right? Even a lot of my friends and family in BC would agree with that comment. Now, Tyler, 2 reports on the future of the coal industry here in Alberta have been given to Energy Minister Sonia Savage. Many are in favor of coal mining for the jobs it creates, especially in some of the local regions, but many others are opposed for the potential environmental damage, including affecting our water supply, in particular the Oldman River. Tyler, the province had an independent panel look at the issues. How many Albertans did they hear from?
Well, they heard from about 1,000 people by email. They got 160 some written submissions or 180 some written submissions, and then held, I think it was 67 meetings across the province to discuss this. A little bit of the recent history, you know, there's been sort of a ban on open pit coal mining in the eastern slopes and foothills of the Rockies since about the 1970s, 1976, I think. And last year, the Kenney government was just like, we're doing away with this policy, and then a bunch of companies sort of said, great, we're going to open coal mines. And it was this massive controversy, a complete misstep by the provincial government. And when this controversy blew up, they sort of said, this is, city slickers who don't like coal and they don't want jobs for small towns. And then, Corb Lund spoke out, the Country Star, Paul Brandt, the Country Star, a bunch of small town mayors raised concerns about this. So they really had to back down quite a bit on this policy change. And the panel that you mentioned was a result of this sort of climb down to come up with some more information and strategy and steps forward on this. So we don't know what's in those reports yet. They're supposed to be released at some point in the new year here, but it is notable that that panel has wrapped up its work and we will be hearing from them. And as we look into a new year, I think that's likely to be one of those issues that we do continue to hear about this year because it's very, very controversial, not just in the city, not just among New Democrats who obviously oppose it, but in some respects, the real UCP heartland where people have concerns about this, in addition to, in other cases, as you alluded to, wanting the jobs.
Now, Tyler, you wrote a piece late last year about Alberta alienation. It's still a real issue here. Now, the government has its 25 Fair Deal panel recommendations, and while there's been some movement on a few, there may be moving ahead with another one, including a potential provincial police force similar to what Ontario has. Now, as we head into the provincial election next year, should we expect to see more standing up for Alberta rhetoric?
That's what I would predict, yeah. Alberta Alienation, of course, people will remember, was at this real high point in 2019. And I think the pandemic sort of, sideswiped that. It's not at quite as high a level right now. But obviously, the Alberta government went ahead with the equalization referendum back in October. There are, as you said, 25 other possibilities of things they can pursue. They did have a report come out on a potential provincial police force. Ooh, say that 10 times fast. A provincial police force come out a little bit later last year, I suppose. So that's something that could happen there could be more developments on that front in the year to come. And no doubt with an election on the horizon, Jason Kenney is going to be trying to position himself as the man who can stand up for Alberta. Rachel Notley is not the person who can stand up for Alberta. We are certainly going to see that. Whether or not we see some policy come out of this, I think is the sort of open question and something I'll be watching really closely because it's a broad slate of policy options and all kind of interesting stuff.
How much of a threat do you think the Alberta Wildrose Independence Party is to the UCP and potentially splitting the right vote as we head into the provincial election of 2023?
It's a great question, and I'm not that bullish on the Wildrose Independence Party, and the reason I say that is Alberta has elected a actual separatist to the legislature once. I think it was Gordon Kessler in either Olds or Okotoks in 1983. That's height of the NEP. Absolute height of Alberta alienation and separation. So in that sense, I think it would be a long shot. The other bit of evidence I think I have for that is we did have the Maverick Party running in the federal election, which had positioned itself as, maybe not quite a separatist party, but very much an Alberta party, similar to the Reform Party of the past. And they did very, very poorly, surprisingly poorly. I think a lot of people predicted they might have done a little bit better. So the point I'm coming around to making is there's not a lot of evidence that Albertans vote overwhelmingly in a protest fashion, I think. And even then, if we go back, to provincial, the Freedom Conservative Party that Derek Fildebrandt ran for a while there didn't do especially well. So, do I think there's room on the right, I should say, for another conservative party like the Wild Rose Party was, in 2015? I think that's a possibility. But the polling shows a lot of frustration, a lot of like kind of openness to think about separation, but that doesn't seem like it translates into outright support for separation. And I think that's where the Wild Rose Independence Party is going to have a fair bit of trouble. But, and I know I'm being long-winded here, we do have a by-election in Fort McMurray, and I believe the leader of the Wild Rose Independence Party, Paul Hinman, who is a former Wild Rose guy, I believe he is running in that by-election against Brian Jean. So he doesn't necessarily have a fabulous chance at winning, if I'm being frank about it, but how he does in that, I think we can maybe take as a little bit of a bellwether about how people feel about that party. So sorry to ramble on, but it's a great question, and there's lots of stuff to think about on that front.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on that, absolutely, with Brian Jean and Hinman up in Fort McMurray. Tyler, you know, the UCP has a bit of time to rebuild its image, and the same thing for Jason Kenney heading into the next provincial election. What will it take? Will it be more spending across the province? Bigger promises?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. No, I think it's going to be the economy turning around. And I think that Jason Kenney is going to wear some of the mistakes of the pandemic, and certainly the New Democrats are going to try and make him wear some of the mistakes of the pandemic. But, you know, as someone told me recently, it might have been Ted Morton when I was speaking to him, you know, $80 per barrel of oil plasters over an awful lot of problems. So I think for the UCP, that's sort of what they're hoping for, that the economy does better and better and better coming into 2023. But, you know, there are other political considerations. You know, a balanced budget's going to make a difference. Holding the line on not introducing something like a sales tax is going to make a difference. Successfully implementing the childcare stuff, which is supposed to be rolling out in the weeks to come, is going to be, you know, a big issue for suburban families and things like that. So there's a bunch of other issues sort of percolating here. The big one for me, I think, has got to be the economy. I don't see a path back to the Premier's office if the economy, you know, completely collapses, because they campaigned in 2019 on recovering the economy. And if they can't say they did that, then I think they're in a fair bit of trouble.
Yeah, we have to get more Albertans working, absolutely, to help the economy rebound. Our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, thanks for joining me today from Edmonton.
Always a pleasure, Hal.
The persecution of Christians around the world appears to be intensifying. Recent reports say an average of 17 followers of Jesus are killed each and every day in Nigeria alone. China and India have governments that are allegedly intent on eradicating Christianity altogether. To discuss this in more detail is Greg Musselman from Voice of the Martyrs Canada. Greg is the Minister at Large for the group and host of the podcast Closer to the Fire. Greg, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Always good to see you, Hal.
You too, brother. Now, before we discuss some of the countries outlined earlier, what's the situation like for Christians in Afghanistan since the Taliban regained control of the country?
Yeah, it is a difficult situation. I mean, not only for Christians, women, children. I mean, it's a real hard situation. But, you know, particularly the followers of Jesus, I mean, they were already facing persecution, you know, even before the Taliban came to power. But, you know, you got radical Islamic groups, you have violent protests, you have the political activity taking place and making it just a very dangerous place to live for Christians, and especially those who have converted from Islam to Christianity, which is the thousands of Christians that are in the country. Most of them come from Islamic backgrounds, you know, so they're facing, beatings and, you know, torture, and some cases martyrdom. It's really hard. I was actually talking on my podcast recently, Hal, to a guy by the name of John Weaver. John is an American. He worked in Afghanistan for over 20 years. And he says it is so heartbreaking almost every day getting messages from people in Afghanistan, not only the Christians, but the Muslims as well, saying, we need to get out of here. It's dangerous. We're going to die if we're found out. So we need to be praying for our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan. You know, one of the things that's asked too is how many Christians are in Afghanistan. Some say as few as, 3,000, maybe as many as 12,000. And as my friend John Weaver says, not enough. But they are definitely being targeted, as are others. Anybody seen collaborating with the groups outside of the Taliban are facing danger at this time.
Now, we've heard reports that the Taliban is actually going door to door looking for Christians and North Americans. What have you heard?
Yeah, I've been hearing reports of that as well. In fact, even just listening to some of the international news coming across, we don't hear as much about it in Canada now. It's kind of faded off the front pages of our newspapers and that. But what we are hearing, though, is that there's these summary executions taking place for those that oppose the Taliban. Now, even the Taliban is saying, no, we've changed. We're kind of a softer version now. We're not going to kill our enemies. We're going to forgive them. But the reality is that is not happening. Now, in some cases, there may be those in the Taliban. Sure, they're more political. They need the aid. I mean, they are a country that's supported by, countries like Canada. But there are those that even maybe getting direction from the government, the Taliban government, to go around and kill the enemies that they see as potentially coming back and being able to pull them from power. And so anybody seen as an enemy, including the Christians, are facing dangerous times. So again, this is a very volatile situation. But before we move off of Afghanistan, let me just say one thing here. When this first happened, a lot of, I think, well-meaning Christian organizations said, we're going to get all the Christians out of the country. Well, if that happens, what about the light of the gospel? What about the last 20 years, since the Taliban was pushed from, out of control there? I mean, they've been causing problems all along. But for those that have come to know Jesus, if they all leave, I mean, what would the situation be? And again, getting back to my friend John Weaver, he's talking to many of the Christians in Afghanistan who are saying, we don't want to leave. We want to stay. The only hope for this broken nation, this nation that's been stuck in war, in repression for years and years, is Jesus. And so we're going to stay. We're going to risk our lives. Now, on the other hand, as a dad, and seeing what's happening, especially when I think of my daughters and granddaughters now, is that I would not want them to live in Afghanistan, can't go to school, can't work. So I'd understand why believers and others want to leave the country, but, we need to be praying for, especially for those that want to stay.
Canada's moved forward with a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics, mostly due to China's poor record when it comes to human rights. How bad are the human rights violations of minorities in China?
They're terrible. I mean, when we hear about the Uyghur Muslims, in the western part of China, 1 to 3 million of those people are in basically concentration camps. It's a horrible situation. Yeah, but the human rights violations, are terrible there. Now, so you have the Uyghur Christians, the Uyghur Muslims, and there are some Uyghur Christians as well. You have other minority groups, including Christians, although when you think about China, 100 to 120 million Christians, it's hard to consider them just a minority. But you've got, the Communist Party of China. Their ideology is, of course, atheistic. They don't want religion in there, and they are very bent on trying to eradicate the church, although we know that's not going to happen. I mean, from a theological, biblical perspective, the gates of hell won't prevail against the church. But, I talked to people like Dr. Bob Fu. He is the founder and president of China Aid, one of our partners with the Voice of the Martyrs. They work with persecuted Christians and other religious minorities. Is saying, you know what, this is a horrible situation. Since 2018, President Xi and his government have made it one of their, priorities to try to eliminate religion from the country. But, in talking to Bob Fu about this, and he was telling me, Purdue University, secular university in Indiana, released a study 3 years ago looking at 100 years of religion in China, not just Christianity, but the sociologists and, that are studying these things estimate there's between 100 to 130 million Christians in China. And if there's not severe persecution, that number could jump to well over 200 million by 2030. But it's a question, the severe persecution, because we've seen how persecution has actually been used to raise up the church in China. And so, we think that and believe that, the persecution has been used to grow the church in China, but extreme persecution may cause people, to want to back down. And the interesting thing is, they've attacked the underground church, the house churches, any group that's not registered by the government. But now even the Chinese Communist Party is going after the government-controlled churches, the 3 self-patriotic churches, tearing down the crosses all over the country and also arresting some of the government pastors. So it's a very difficult situation. And, we've got situations even right now where there's a church near in the southern part of China called the Shenzhen Holy Reformed Church, where 27 adults and 32 children actually left the country. They're led by a pastor by the name of Pan Yongguan, and they went to South Korea, Jeju Island, because the persecution became so severe that people are being tortured, imprisoned, and so they're now trying to get to America through Texas. Actually, there's a number of churches down there that have said that we will take these people in because, again, talking to Bob Fu, saying that if they are sent back to China, they will be tortured. They may, be imprisoned and in some cases killed. So this ramping up, of the Chinese government in this, where they're trying to bring them into the ideology, and they see Christianity and other religions getting in the way of what they want to do. But I think it's, and I would, hopefully our country will join at least the political boycott and put more pressure on China. Although, as we've seen in the past, they don't seem to bow down to pressure in any real way.
India apparently also has a campaign that has led to an increase of religiously motivated persecution against Christians. How is that happening?
Well, yeah, and you're right. The level of violence against Christians in India by Hindu extremists, and this is really being fueled by the BJP, which is the governing party, Prime Minister Modi in the nation, that they want to eliminate anything that doesn't go along again with their ideology and their religion of Hinduism. So this deadly campaign really coincides with the Indian government's agenda to turn India into a Hindu nation. And as a result, Christians are facing an increase in religiously motivated persecution. And, we look at a number of these states and the anti-conversion laws that are taking place. So you have Jharkhand, you have Uttar Pradesh, you have Tamil Nadu, you have Chhattisgarh, now considered the most dangerous places, to be a Christian. So you have beatings, arrests, church destruction, and at times death are occurring. And I just give you one example. There's a 16-year-old boy by the name of Nitish Kumar. He's from the northern Indian state of Bihar, and he had acid thrown on him this past summer, left him with severe burns, over 60% of his body. Wow. Now, a local pastor got Nitish to a clinic. They treated him and then sent him to a severe burn clinic as well. Unfortunately, he died of his injuries. Trying to find out the motive behind this, really unknown at this point. But there are members of the Christian community that believe it because of his Christian activities along with his brother, that Nitish and his brother, they were holding prayer meetings, and the two actually had come to faith in Jesus 2 years ago. So that really is seen by these Hindu radicals as something that they're not going to tolerate. And as a result of that, they take these actions. And then when the Christians go to the police to, bring charges or, to bring a complaint, the, situation is often ignored. So, things are definitely increasing. I mean, we look at China, we look at India, the two, most populated nations in the world. And there really is this concerted effort to try to eliminate Christianity, or at least to slow down the growth of the gospel.
Now, Greg, we're constantly hearing of Christian villages being attacked by militant Muslims in Nigeria. Why isn't the government there doing more to protect its citizens?
Hal, that is a great question. And I have asked it, from a number of our partners, in Nigeria. Pastor Yunusa Madu, he is with Christian Solidarity Worldwide, also the General Secretary for the Evangelical Winning All Denomination. And I said, why are these things continue to happen? I mean, just last week, again, a village was attacked, primarily a Christian village in northern Nigeria. 10 believers were killed, homes were destroyed, church burned down, and it goes on and on and on. And I know that Yunusa told me, every morning he wakes up, it seems there's another attack. So why isn't the government doing more? Either they are not all that engaged, they don't care, they say they do. There's always these public statements coming out that they're shocked and they're appalled by what's going on, but they don't seem to be doing much. And, whether they don't have the capability or the political will to do something. But the sad part is that many of our brothers and sisters in Christ are constantly being killed. I mean, just from the first 200 days of this year, and I know that these statistics will soon be updated, but you've had over 3,400 Christians killed just in the first 200 days of 2021. And then last year, that's about the same amount that were killed for the whole of last year. So it's increasing. As you mentioned off the top, 17 believers on an average being killed every single day. And this just goes on and on. And one of the things I think it's important for us, Hal, to remember is that these are our brothers and sisters in Christ. These are individuals. You know, think of Pastor Silas Yakubu Ali, Kaduna State. Recently, he went out for a pastoral visit. Well, the next morning, he didn't show up at home. He had been murdered by militant Muslims. Now, whether it was the Boko Haram or the Fulani herdsmen, at that time, we didn't hear anybody claiming, you know, responsibility. And then the day they discovered Pastor Ali's body, they also found out that another 10 Christians or so had been killed in a church that he was also giving oversight of. You know, so, and you know, it's not only the killing of the Christians, and then there's the kidnapping of the girls and the women forced into these marriages, often these young girls with older Muslim men, they're forced into Islam. It is a horrible situation. Now, also might say too, is that it's not only Christians that are being killed by these radical groups, these militant Islamic groups, but it's also Muslims that are sympathetic towards Christians, or they don't go along with this very radical idea of Islam, and they are also suffering as well. And we need to remember, you know, these even people in the Boko Haram and the Fulani herdsmen, we know of those that have come to Jesus when they see the way that our brothers and sisters are dying, you know, the way, even in the midst of horrible situations, that there's that peace, and they're coming to know Jesus. So we don't look at them as the enemy. Yes, they're doing horrible things, but we also know that God loves them too. And that is the message that I continue to hear through Nigeria, through at least the churches I've been in contact with, and have been there a number of times, is they continue to preach forgiveness and love and mercy. Many of these people, they have no idea what they're doing in terms of the violence that they're perpetrating against the followers of Jesus. So our prayers need to be, you know, for our brothers and sisters, certainly in Christ, those that love Jesus, and also for those persecutors, because Jesus told us even to be praying and to blessing our persecutors. So we need to be doing that. But Nigeria continues to be a hotbed. I'll be honest, you know, I read about it almost every day. Something else is happening, and it's tragic.
Have to keep them in our prayers, absolutely. Greg Musselman is the Minister at Large for the Voice of the Martyrs Canada. He also hosts the Closer to the Fire podcast. Greg, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.